Good morning.
Morning.
So you may be wondering why we were singing Christmas carols again today. When Christmas time is in the rearview mirror by about 2 weeks. The fact is that in much of the Christian world, yesterday was considered Epiphany, the day that the wise men were said to have delivered their gifts to the child Jesus. And the story, as it's told in the Christian Gospel of Matthew, goes something like this. It's Matthew 2. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? We observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was born. And when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. So just as the time period approaching Christmas and the birth of Jesus, called Advent, is brimming with meaning and significance, the story of the Magi is also very insightful. The word Magi comes from an ancient Persian word that essentially means a practitioner of esoteric knowledge. These Magi were likely well studied in the sister sciences of astrology and astronomy, which at that time were a combined science. Perhaps they're Zoroastrian priests from Persia, or Jewish kings from Yemen, or Hellenistic scholars, or maybe one of each. We really don't know what their background was. And we also don't know exactly how many there were. That just is a mythic proportion. So regardless of their origins and their fields of study, but in stark contrast to the lowliest shepherds of shepherds who were the first to hear of the angelic herald of Jesus' birth. These Magi are well educated, they're well respected, and they are well to do. While we have no historical evidence of their actual existence or specific proof of the exact events of the story, by all counts, the Magi represent the best of the best, and they're symbolic as the earth's powerful, humbly acknowledge the power-filled presence of the light of Christ, as well as the very real truth that the message of Jesus, of grace and love and peace and compassion, was intended for all people, even those beyond the bounds of Judaism, beyond the bounds of country or title, privilege, culture, and status. Scholars estimate that the Magi and their entourage likely found Jesus as a toddler. It wasn't 2 weeks after he was born, but more of it as a toddler, and probably living in Jerusalem at that time, because that was where Mary was from. After diligently following that guiding star that led them to the Christ child, they delivered their treasures and they're preparing to depart. They've accomplished what they set out to do. But that's where the story gets really interesting. We hear of yet another dream. It's the fifth dream in the story of Christmas. The writer of the book of Matthew tells us that in this dream, the Magi are told to bypass Herod and take another way home. They likely had already traveled for 2 months at least, assuming they didn't have any trouble getting to their destination. But now they're instructed to take a detour to avoid King Herod and his interrogation. Well, Herod was known for his tyrannical cruelties to any and all who threatened his power. I probably don't need to remind you that Herod had half the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish council, his wife and his sons put to death for disagreeing with him. And as David cited last week, Caesar Augustus himself said that it was safer to be Herod's sow as a Jew, he wouldn't have eaten or touched a pig, than it was to be his son. So in Herod's mind, even a little child who might become king had to be stopped at all costs. And I like to imagine in my mind, that's why all of Jerusalem was terrified at the news. They knew there would be a terrible outcome. But can you imagine what the detour meant to the Magi? They had been gone already a pretty long time. And now they and all of who was going to accompany him, their families, their servants, all the animals, and along with the supplies and the provisions needed for an extra long detour, all of that had to be considered in charting a new course instead of the course that would take them directly home. And it's not going to be the short route. This one's going to take them out of their way. They were skilled enough in astronomy and astrology to find their way to where the baby Jesus lived. So I like to think they definitely could find their way home. It's just that they might not be as highly regarded as they had been on the path they chose. They wouldn't have been maybe respected in these places where they weren't known. There would be unknown risks and unavoidable dangers along the way. But as we stand on this side of the Christmas story, including the story of the Magi, we can look back and see clearly that there were all kinds of signs that were intended to guide the participants of the Judeo-Christian account of Jesus' birth. I think everybody is affected by a sign. There's the angelic visitation of Gabriel telling Mary that she's pregnant. Joseph received multiple dreams, really more like visions or visitations from unnamed angels who directed him on how he and Mary should handle every serious situation they were in. And then there's the angel Gabriel who returns to herald the news of Jesus' birth to the shepherds. And lastly, we learn of the Magi, the wise ones who had charted the course by following a star, which in and of itself was a sign, to find Jesus. They had put their trust in that sign, and it had led them where they needed to be. And from all we know, they trusted the dream that told them to take the long way home. We all, I believe, have experienced a number of various signs along our own paths of life. Probably more than we're aware of, and definitely more than we have heeded and obeyed. I could kick myself for the number of times I have ignored a sign. Sometimes a sign may leave us without a single doubt about the direction we're supposed to take in our lives. They are as clear as a star in the dark night sky. We've all had plans and goals and dreams that we have charted an exact course for, and we've made plans that would take us clearly toward those dreams. Then other times we think that just maybe we heard a slight whisper in our ear of some kind of guidance, or that dream that continues to kind of float in our heads that seems to gently nudge us toward a certain action or a specific direction, or even like I've had a nudge to send an email. Or maybe, just maybe, we were brave enough and obedient enough to follow the signs we've been given. But what about the times we've been given irrefutable signs that hands us a significant detour? One that takes us on a journey we had not anticipated despite our best efforts and despite our obedience. In medicine, I worked with couples who would give anything and do everything they could in order to conceive a child. They plotted out the steps with the doctor about what they could do that would help them do that. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't work. And sometimes the detour they were given was when the child that they had and that was born had physical and mental challenges despite their best efforts. Certainly, Mary and Joseph were pursuing a dream when they were planning to get married, but they were handed a detour when the angel Gabriel announced to Mary that she was pregnant. And to me, that was a detour of a lifetime. That's how I imagine the instructions of a detour felt to these magi. They had bravely followed the star and found the baby whom they believed would be the King of the Jews. But their work was not finished once they had reached that destination. And the last part, that major detour, wasn't going to be easy. And you know, we never learn from the gospel writers as to whether their trip back home was a success or not. One of the major themes surrounding the birth of Jesus, and to me, a persistent theme in his life, is the ending may not be what you expected, continuously. But another major theme is that there are always signs to lead us along the way, like the Christmas star and the angels and dreams. They guided each person involved. And sometimes our paths are brightly lit by a sign. There are signs that are as subtle as a whisper, or maybe as ethereal as a dream. Other times our paths take significant turns and unexpected detours when the sign points us in a completely different direction than we thought we should be going. It may turn out that what we planned isn't the story of how our lives will unfold. God's view of our lives includes deeper truths and bigger backstories than we could ever anticipate. So the stories of Advent and those of the Magi invite us to trust that we can and will be rightly guided by signs along the way. even when we don't know for certain where the sign is going to take us or what life will bring us along the way of an unknown path. And even when the next chapter in our story isn't what we expected, there is always more wisdom and more insight to be gained when we trust the guidance from our wisdom and our inner leadings that we receive from signs all along the way. And so it is. Amen.